So let's talk about generating random samples. We did that a little bit when we talked about the vocabulary. I kind of went through that and talked about generating random samples. If you pick people out of this class to generate a random sample, you want to make sure you generate a random sample. You don't just pick people by convenience. So if I was in this class just picking this table and calling these two my random sample would be poor because everyone didn't have a chance. I just picked a table, right? So random sample, one of the best ways is everyone has an equal chance to be drawn. Does that make sense? So you guys are the population. A random sample means the best rule would be pull out of a hat, names out of a hat. A poor sample would be just me going, Travis and Trayson, you're my sample. For no other reason than your names start with T. Everyone didn't have an equal chance, so it's not a random sample. So let's see what happens when we have a random sample and how we can use it. And it's used a lot in business because it lets them know how to do stuff. So information being gathered, everything is called a population. A portion of it's called a sample. A random sample is where everyone has an equal chance of being selected. More likely to be representative of population. You saw in that first video we had, they actually have ways they weight things, which is where they get really crazy in census taking and stuff. And they give more weight to certain people and less weight to others. So let's see this. Maury owns 3 bagel shops. Each shop sells 500 bagels per day. Maury asked her store managers to use a random sample to see how many whole wheat bagels are sold at each store each day. So they're going to take a random sample, meaning at some point they're going to start. And these managers are going to pick that time ahead of time. They're not going to call it at a certain point. So here's the results. So Shop A sold 50 bagels in their sample. They sold 500 overall. We got to remember that they each sold 500 bagels, right? That's important. So in these 50 bagels, 10 were whole wheat. Shop B sold 100 bagels in their sample period. In that, 23 were whole wheat. Shop C sold 25 bagels. In that, 7 were whole wheat. So if you assume these are representative, meaning that that's how it follows all day, how many whole wheat bagels are sold at each store? How can I figure out how many in a sample? What's some of the ways I can do this?
Just divide the total number by the...
Divide the total number by this?
By the total. Or...
Actually...
No, I meant, like...
Divide
the total by 500.
Well...
Do that, and then you would...
Okay, I get what you're doing. You're dividing this by 500, or 500 by this.
Then you multiply it.
Then multiply this. That's functional. You could also find the percent by dividing the portion that are whole wheat by the total. They all work, right? So let's try your way for the first one. Let's divide 500 by 50. So we're dividing the 500 by the number sold, and then we're going to multiply it by this. Does that make sense to y'all? Bryson? So start doing it. Divide 500 by 50. What do you get?
10.
So 10 times 10 is?
100.
So they sold 100 whole wheat bagels. Try this one. Divide 23 by 100. By 100. Divide 23 by 100. That gives you a percent, right?
23%.
And multiply that by 500.
0.13.
23 divided by 100, then multiply it by the total number. So you've got a percent, and now you're multiplying by the total number. 115. Did you guys see how I use that? Now, which way is best? You can also set up a proportion. So in this one, I divided 23 divided by 100 times the total, right? Up here, we took 500, we divided it by 50, and we multiplied it by 10. Down here, you can also set a proportion. So you can say 7 over 25 equals x over 500. Right? So this would break out if I did my cross bearing, it would get 25x equals 7 times 500. What's 7 times 500?
3,500.
How much?
3,500.
3,500. And then I divide both sides by 25. Because I'm dividing by the coefficient, right? So x equals 3,500 divided by 25.
140.
140. So there are several ways I can do this. Travis's way that he mentioned first is probably the easiest. It requires the less mental juggling. All ways are useful. Does that make sense? Remember, lots of tools. Use the tool that makes you happiest. So let's look at this. Now we know, rank the samples in terms of how representative they're likely to be. So let's look at the samples and the sample size. Which one is probably the best sample?
Shop C.
Shop C does 25 bagels in their sample. That means that there's a very small proportion, right? We're looking at 500 overall. The best sample is the one that's going to give us the biggest percentage.
100.
Yeah, the 100. Shop B's example, because it takes out the most. And then rank it down. So Shop B, Shop A, and then Shop C. Whoever's running Shop C, they really didn't want to do it. They just find out 25 bagels and called it a day. Okay? So, which sample do you think is the best sample to use?
Shop B.
Shop B. It's the best sample. Now, so Maury wants to figure out how to tell the manager how many whole wheat bagels to make each day. She's going to use Shop A's, or Shop B's representative, which is this, right? So each shop should make 115 bagels a day, whole wheat. Why would she care about how many bagels the shop makes each day?
Because that's her business and she needs to know that.
What if they make too many whole wheat bagels?
And she'll have
Dead shops.
some left over and get old.
Can you sell old bagels?
No.
So she'll lose money, right? What if she makes too few?
And she'll, no.
And she will lose money.
So it's important to know how much to actually make ahead of time. That's how restaurants make a business. If you can't do that, that's how restaurants fail, is they make too much food or too little food. And this has happened before. If you think about it, you go to a restaurant, and out front it says prime rib. And you're like, yes. And you go and say, I'll have some prime rib. I'm sorry, sir, we're out. It makes it very hard to go back to that restaurant because they hurt your feelings. You wanted prime rib and they don't have any.
How would they hurt your feelings?
Yeah, I would just go back there.
I know.
got a boo-boo. I'm gonna cry.
Well, we generally don't go to places that don't meet our needs. Right?
I mean,
If you went to the let's say you go to the ice cream store and you really want chocolate ice cream. And you walk in there and they say, we're sorry, we're out of chocolate.
and we're gonna get vanilla.
But are you really happy with it?
I mean, yeah, it's ice cream.
I'll just sit there and wait till
Okay, I'll buy that. But would you rather, if there's another shop next door and if there's another shop next door and they still had chocolate, where would you take your business?
didn't have
I mean, obviously to the next one.
And that's how businesses work. So you've got to use, math is used, especially this way, a lot. You guys can work at a fast food restaurant, and that's fine. You can manage a fast food restaurant, and that's better. The pay is consistent.
I'm gonna work at Pepe's Diner.
Okay.
I have a friend that she works
Any question on random samples?
No.